Today we are interviewing Emma Bridgewater, bastion of impacting communities.
Bastion. I like that. Yeah.
Thank the Lord, thank the Lord. All things creative, setting up Emma Bridgewater in 1984.
84 was my first trip to Stoke. We got going in early 85.
Now we're just going to run through some facts just to...
Yeah, because who knows who I am?
Yeah, exactly. You founded Emma Bridgewater and each year sell 1.9 million pieces, approximately.
Whatever that means, we've traded profitably almost our whole history and grown in fits and starts. During COVID, we tipped sort of something like 35 million turnover. The number of pieces, if you think that's right, that means someone's put it on the internet.
Yeah.
Hopefully for my organisation and it's correct. I lost count.
Easy to lose count. Another interesting fact, 72,000 personalised items sold in 2003 alone, which when one thinks of your products, gifting's a big part of that, and an interesting.
You say gifting, I say giving presents.
Giving presents. Present
giving is huge and sweet, and that is really at the heart of the business. It's where I started. I wanted to find something for my mum that said how much I missed her and how much I'd like to be sitting just like this at the kitchen table with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, gossiping away. But I was in my early 20s. I was running around in London, and I went to look in a china shop, and they didn't have anything that in any way felt like her kitchen. And that was the hooray moment when I thought, I'm going to make that pottery.
To make that kind of expression, you were like, no, this is going to happen.
I think we need this, and I think if I made it, people would buy it, and it's crazy. And then when I went to Stoke, probably about 3 or 4 weeks later, I was completely hooked. There was so much I didn't know, but what I could see was that this had been an incredible heavy industrial city, coal mines and foundries, and all these famous potteries, Spode and Copeland and Minton and Wedgwood. And it was also obvious that things weren't going well. And I felt a very clear and distinct sense that I was going to make one of those potteries, one of the big, at the time, many derelict Victorian factories. I was going to bring one of them back to life. It was as simple as that.
And that's what you've done. Yeah. 300 people are employed.
We're about 360, I think, at the moment.
Two things that I want to touch on here that really are quite striking. One is, and you talked about this, but when you had this gut feel that this would work, and then you had some samples made, you would effectively sell them in trade fairs, and you talk of this just having this sense that it will work. Where do you think that comes from? How do you tap into that?
I went through a period of kind of very consciously seeking for inspiration. I'd worked for my dad, he was an entrepreneur. I'd done porridge as an overdrawn student in his company, which was admirably organised. And then I had this wonderful contrast experience. Immediately after university, I started working for some girls who designed knitwear in a very marvellously, gloriously eccentric and effective way. And I learnt that my year with them, an enormous amount. And in my simple mind, and it is brilliant, the bliss of ignorance is very helpful. I was in my early 20s and I knew nothing really. But I could see that his booted and suited kind of outlook and we're doing this for the joy of it. We love what we make, but nobody's going to break their backs getting too overexcited about growing the business enormously. That both sort of had a lot to recommend them, and I thought I think the things I understand about both these businesses I can blend to my advantage. And so I then went on a kind of conscious hunt for an idea, and the moment came really first in that china shop, thinking the factories aren't making what I want to buy to give my mum. So there's a gap in the market, and there could be a dresser at the end of the shop there with brightly coloured, hand-decorated, mismatched kind of pottery, the kind of thing she likes. And I could see it in my mind's eye in a very sort of vague way. But when I went to Stoke, lots and lots of things happened, but the main thing was my idea gelled, and it had a reality. And that one of the derelict Victorian factories I drove past on that first taxi ride was this incredibly clear emblem for me of what I was going to do. And I think that's really lucky. I think once you can envisage what you're trying to do, then doing it is inevitable. And I think quite often it's vague. You're longing for something, but you don't quite know what. Once, if you are lucky enough, or when you perhaps have to try and put yourself through the process of finding the thing that you're going to want to leap out of bed every morning to do. And I definitely found it there and then. And the more I learnt about Stoke, the more kind of completely obsessed I became. Boring on the subject, I know. The ancient mariner of the potteries tested to chant on about the place, but it still blows me away. The traditions and the skills inherent in the city, which are, and I often at night wake up and think someone's dying tonight and taking a painting skill that I have failed, or making skill or gilding that I haven't found out about, and I can't bear it. I feel that something is slipping away. Because I work in Stoke and because I love the city. There's nowhere cheerier, friendlier or funnier. I know what an incredible loss that is. And it seems baffling to me that we don't value that, and that it seemed like a reasonable proposition to dump that workforce and go and find cheap manufacturing and trash some country that might not have wanted it at all, really. It just makes me sad.
You made a Dame this year, was it?
Yes. I think it came out last year, but I've just been to Windsor the week before.
Which touches on services of the economy.
Yes, I immediately go into imposter syndrome and I think I haven't done nearly enough to deserve it. I wish that the business was much bigger. I wish that I could say that what I've done has drawn lots of other people to Stoke. I think there are interesting green shoots there. There are some small businesses that have got interesting things going on. And there are 2 or 3 big businesses, thank God, that still mean there is a real industry there. But it's fragile. And you and I have been talking about shopping and being conscious of the food we buy. Shopping is the most political thing we do. And taking the trouble to find out where the sofa or where the cyclamen were grown, where the sofa was made, where the china's made, it is worth it, because your decision makes a big difference to the world. And I wish, as I say, I wish I'd had more of an effect in Stoke, but we do put something like, this year it'll be about 14 million into the local economy in salaries. And there's also, that's the direct effect, but then there's there's sort of around that, the supply chain and the families of all the people that we work with. It's still only a drop in the ocean, but it's significant.
It can't be taken for granted. You live with what you do and your passions, your energy every day, but that's an extraordinary accomplishment, what you do. But what's very striking is just how connected you feel to contributing and how much pleasure that gives you and how part of the system you feel. And sometimes there does seem people, for so many different reasons, can feel on their own or disconnected to wanting to contribute. Tax is such a big issue, for example. How do you think we can wire and encourage people to want to contribute more? And contribution comes in so many ways, right? Some people can contribute to helping support a family in a really big way. Other people work on policy, various things. But just pushing us to a society where we are wanting to contribute more, how do you see that gap being bridged?
It's a really interesting question. I worry that what's happening at the moment is the more time we spend on our phones and particularly engaged in social media, the more we drive ourselves apart from each other. And I do feel strongly that there's a very simple truth, which is spend less time on your phone. Don't expect that's where you're going to find your true love. It's just where you're going to find disappointment and frustration and that sort of anxious feeling that the algorithms stir up in you. Put it down, walk away. You've met Guy Hayward from the British Pilgrimage Trust. He taught me, he reminded me what Mum had taught all of us when we were little. You need to get outside. You need to walk. You need to open your eyes and broaden your horizons. And you need to be out amongst people. I think what we need is community. There are lots of significant things that we're flinging away at the moment. One of them is community. Actual knowing your neighbours' names and being involved in helping each other. Like when I locked myself out the other day, and there was a hilarious thing of getting permission from these neighbours to use the key to that neighbour's front door so that I could climb in over the wall because I had left the kitchen door open, luckily. And the joy of that they all know each other and that I've arrived in a community that has got a very strong, it remembers being a closely knit community. We need that community, and we need some kind of a spiritual life. For lots of good reasons, people have turned away from organised and traditional religion, but both those things are profoundly important, profoundly lovely. They're things that enrich and deepen your life and make it much more obvious how crucial it is that you can make a contribution, not just snatch what you can for yourself. And we have a tendency to say it's all got to happen at school. Whether it's teaching children to sit at the table or to brush their teeth, we always say it's got to happen in school. I think the schools do a lot about it. I think it's a family issue. My mother's family do come from it's a very strong tradition of service. And so I think probably my great-grandmother was even laying that drip on me when I was a little girl. I remember spending quite a bit of time with her. Somehow I knew that life was a serious business, and certainly the kind of granny conversations I had as a little girl were about making you're very lucky and you need to pay that back down the line. And I don't think that's very fashionable. I don't think you do hear that much. But I do think it's what people essentially innately want to do. But I think we're being enslaved to a machine that doesn't please us. Capitalism is basically pretty horrid. I know it's the sort of system that has perhaps best served us fairly well, but I think we should all be questioning fundamentally whether what we want is actually more money. But it isn't.
But social media almost feels like a kind of it encourages like a very individualistic world where it's
individuation
all about me,
is
look at me. Do you have a belief on how that could be changed in small ways?
Well, I think it only changes in each individual, and it is about putting your phone down and committing yourself to being more creative, make a cake rather than buy it sometimes. Ask your friends around we know the kind of things we should be doing, and yet it's very easy to be doom scrolling for hours on end. I don't think there's a sort of mass movement, but I do think that there's a great undertow now that says this isn't enough, this isn't working, this isn't making us happy. But it's only, we each need to tackle that ourselves, I think. And I know that when I feel anxious, doing something creative, whether it's making bread or I've recently relearnt the crocheting that one of my grannies taught me when I was little, and I make big patchwork quilts. They take about 2 years each, and I've made, I think, when I delivered the last one recently to one of my nieces, I think I've made 13 or 14. So I have to have something that allays the kind of sense of, what am I doing? It doesn't, and anxiety. If you do something creative, you can't feel anxious. It's a brilliant bit of.
You just don't really see creativity or people doing creative things necessarily on social media. It's generally people meeting up socially.
Yes.
In a bar or
they're trying to make you
beach.
feel that they're at a party that you haven't been asked to. Is the sort of broad sense of it.
Yeah. There's so much evidence that people have so much to learn from you based on how you contribute to people and all the creations that you've created. Talk to us about your simple joy and where that comes from.
Simple joy is family and friends. It's sharing meals together. I'm lucky, my mum was a very good cook, my stepmother was a very good cook. My children all are. My ex is a very good cook. That business of knocking out in quite a sort of rough and ready way, delicious food and sharing it with people. I do think that the grounding things, such as be aware of going outside every day and not just scuttling from one shop to the next and necking a lot of coffee on the run, but go for a walk and notice, at the moment, the storm of the blackthorn, the sloes, what will be sloes, that's the white blossom everywhere, not the big fat. There's lots of prunus that flowers early, they're tame trees, but the wild blackthorn everywhere is so fantastically beautiful at the moment. Those are the things that, noticing that, and I really love having a creative making project on the go, so that I look forward very much to evenings at home where I light the fire. For me, lighting a fire is I love that ritual. I love candlelight. Obviously, I don't do my crochet or my sewing by candlelight. That would be daft. And I would be squinting away, and it would be very messy. It's quite simple things, and some routines that ground you. Family, being a granny, absolutely marvellous. So exciting. Taking him to the V&A for children down the road from here, and seeing his utter delight at all the other children playing, but also the doll's houses completely fascinated him. And we went to the Aardman exhibit about Wallace and Gromit and animation, which he's too small to understand, but when he saw the motorbike, he was very excited. He's not 3 yet, but he loved it. We sat on the floor and watched clips of films. There couldn't be anything more joyful than that.
Yeah. And work, forgetting the scale of things, where are the simple pleasures from?
Oh, the creative
the
time. There's a wonderful studio set up in Stoke, and some of the design team are in London, because we've always had a customer-facing London office. But when the creative team are all in Stoke, and we are very keen on getting out paper and mixing up gouache to match some of the pottery colours, and doing a lot of playing with pattern in a very messy, speedy way, and getting everyone, and get people who don't normally, because working on Macs is awful, that's a real joy stealer. But the body of the volume of work means an awful lot of it is done on computers, but I'm always very keen that the first principles are in everyone's heads, that you should make wet artwork and understand the spontaneity of that, and try and keep that character. Don't, because the awful thing about Max is the neatening, and once you start neatening you don't know when to stop, and before you know it you've neatened the life out of it. So trying to keep it quite splashy and get people who don't normally ever get busy with a pencil and paper working creatively, that's really joyful. And the factory itself, I always love being in the factory, but watching the extraordinary pleasure it tends to give almost everyone who goes on the factory tour, which is an enormous number of people now. They're fully booked all the time, the tours. And that interaction, the fun of watching the teams making diligently and skillfully, and the chatty ones are on the ends of the rows, and there'll be a guy who might easily have worked in a factory, or they know the industry very well. They'll be telling very good stories, and sometimes the potters will join in. But the fun for me is seeing the customers meeting the makers, and the makers really fully understanding how much the customer loves what they do. So that kind of incredible feedback loop, which doesn't happen very often, I don't think. There's so much pride and happiness in that. Lots and lots. Obviously, there are also annoying rows and things going wrong and what have you. But there's a lot of positive reaffirmation going on all the time in that. And it also, you can see people, it's particularly men of a certain age, who I think it's a kind of a train set too. But most people look at it and they think, if I'd started a business, it would be like this. It's an analogue antidote to our increasingly confusing AI-driven world. And it's so obviously, simply human.
Yeah, I think 30 pairs of hands touch each item
yes.
on average.
We are going to have to mechanise a bit, but that's simply because it's increasingly hard to recruit young men into the clay side of the business, which is a pity. But the industry has itself to blame. We weren't, I don't think, historically very responsible employers. But anyway, for lots of reasons, but primarily because there isn't an enormous demand. There are lots of people coming in to make the stuff. We will mechanise some of the making and focus on training people to do the interesting bits. But really the hand decorating that's the special thing that we do within still a very traditional making framework.
Tell us about the kind of ideation process, because when you're thinking, should we do a new object or a new pattern, do you get all sorts of people in to test things out and give you ideas? Is it all internally done?
Interesting question. For me, no. I think the creative process is doing things that being inspired is often, it's to do with finding other people's energy. It's going to India. Last year I went to the Kumbh Mela, last February, biggest human gathering on the planet, an extraordinary Hindu festival of incredibly compelling and beautiful. That inspires me. I don't come back and do a lot of obviously Indian designs at all. But it stirs me up to dig deeper and try harder. And I think I look to the natural world around me. That's what I love the most. And I think most designers are really drawing from very early reference, but what you need to find the energy to get really shoveled down into it and find some new iterations. So I'm very keen that I sometimes even, this is increasingly not going to be me, but what I have done for the last many years is think out a manifesto twice a year of themes that are going to be relevant in those months next year. So we're usually about a year ahead. And that's now happening within the organisation without me. I think the creative director and the head of design will be thinking that out. So sometimes the zeitgeist whispers to you about to me about things that are going to be important. A little whispery voice that says we're taking our sort of pagan roots more seriously. So I like delving into that. For Mother's Day, for example, the children and I are talking about taking a picnic to we're arguing about where on the Ridgeway to go and have a picnic, perhaps Barbary Castle, maybe Uffington Castle or Wayland Smithy, all favourite places. Because for me there's a really exciting energy about Neolithic sites and the ways in which our pagan souls are still alive in us, and that a lot of the most powerful things work because they tap into those feelings.
Talking of feelings, objects carry bizarre power with people. I brought in an espresso cup that I made, and it carries such an irrational sense of I really care for it. And then
it's irrational, but it's not rational.
Yeah, exactly. And then this was made through a friend in New York, and she loves to know that it's still being used. You'll get so many stories of people telling you about that object. My mother, for example, has got a kettle that says Laura's. Yeah. Sorry, not a kettle. My mother's got a teapot saying, Laura's teapot. And it's just seeing the pleasure she gets from it. A countless pleasure. It's like a mystery how objects, you were talking about this
primitive
here.
Methodist tea plate.
And
freight. These things of yours, they've got new freight in them. But imagine what... Oh, God. Look at these lovely old cups. This is the kind of thing I buy compulsively. Imagine the conversations they've overheard.
Yeah.
Maybe
this is the best conversation.
They could tell us, couldn't they?
They could tell us.
But how marvellous they are.
The colour.
And yes, they get used as ashtrays. And you can see I've got loads and loads of them.
Do people write to you stories about... Would
Oh,
you want
God,
them
we have...
to do that?
When I meet, we do collector events. But I hang out with the customers quite a bit along the way. And for years I did, God knows, many trade fairs every year. And the wholesale customers are just as... They are the same as the... Predominantly women who understand just what you said, that these things really matter. They're chosen with extreme care, and they matter because of all the associated. So when I was thinking about Mum's kitchen, I'm thinking of the kitchen table, what all those crocks have, all the meals, all the people, all the conversations, all the laughing and crying, all the big moments and then the trivial grind. It's all told in teacups, I think.
There are some objects, maybe it's from childhood to you, that you so treasure, and they give you a sense of grounding, right? Is there an object you can think of?
Trouble is quite a lot. And I don't know if this is a bit of a recent makeover because I'm showcasing kitties. I really love kitties. My daughter Kitty's Welsh blankets and Fair Isle spongeware recently. But things like that, which I think Mason's, that plate, alphabet plate, that isn't from my childhood, but we had those. The very, very good news is people smash a lot of crockery. Yeah. I realised I was looking at a picture of my mum and I standing in her Wiltshire kitchen with all the stuff behind. And I've got one of the plates I can see, I know still exists. An enormous amount of the rest of it, my sisters, my brother, whatever. But it may still have some of it. But a great deal of it gets ground to dust, which I like, because it means they've got to come and buy some more from me.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't discourage. I'd like people to wash these things up rather carefully and not put these beautiful things in the machine. But sadly, things do get broken, so I have to go and buy more.
Yeah, the repeat customer.
Yes.
The repeat customer.
Very important person. People who they're totemic, aren't they? You could say that this is it is to some extent the family altar, and these are the kind of the chalices that furnish. It is important stuff. But I like the fact that it's profoundly important, but it's on quite a nice, cosy, smallish scale. We don't need to get too serious about it.
Yeah.
I feel I'm privileged to have a very intimate relationship with people at their breakfast table, which is so nice. It's not life and death. It's love and gossip and cups of tea. That's my involvement. And as you asked a very nice question earlier about presents, you called it gifting, and I ticked you off and said, no, it's called giving presents. But I think that there's something so nice about the care with which we choose when we're giving presents. And indeed, we do make thousands and tens of thousands of personalised pieces. And here's a joke. I could remember from childhood how much I'd loved having a mug that said Emma. But when one of my sisters commissioned a different potter to make a plate for my dear sister, I wept. I was completely blown away. And I hadn't realised just how lovely it is when someone makes something for you. It's amazing.
You know those little moments that lift your day? A smile, the sun coming out, or a piece of chocolate. Audrey's Chocolates have been handcrafting chocolate for over 70 years. Chocolate to die for. It comes in beautiful boxes that make for the perfect gift. Or bars of chocolate that feed daily joy. Discover your moment of joy by visiting audreyschocolates.co.uk and treat yourself to 10% off using the code TheCollective10.
But we live in such a weird world where you can order things so quickly now that these things carry so much weight. And there are people in the world, they don't want the second wash bag or, getting gifts right. Getting gifts to mean something. It's not about what you spend, it's the thought, isn't it? Would you ever have these beautiful plates? Could it work that people could write a letter and that it could be printed?
I did that at the beginning. Oh, okay, you're talking about digital printing, which I think may be coming. Yes.
Yeah, so I go on your wonderful website, which everyone's going to do. You'd be clinically mad not to. And you've already written a letter. Could something like that be put on a plate?
It's a very nice thought. So far, we've transcribed messages for people, and for possibly overly bossy reasons, there is a prescription.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely possible that we could be more accommodating. And I think what's coming is we've made very little use of digital printing for what you might put on a cup and saucer or a mug or whatever. But it's coming. And as the technology improves, I get more interested in it. And clearly at that point, you could reproduce, if you could print it with a beautiful depth of colour, which until now hasn't really been possible with digital ceramic printing, then I'm on for it. I think it'd be lovely.
Interestingly, you can type a message and then there's an AI pen. There are businesses that have these, and it looks like a handwritten note.
Yes, when I find that's what happens on legal documents and there's this weird fake of my signature, I get quite cross about it. But I love the idea that you could use the size of the centre of the side plate. So we'd say it's a 5-inch circle or whatever it is, and you write a life-size bit of it, or we can shrink it to go in the middle.
Yeah.
That would seem to me, I'd rather it was in your handwriting. And it's so nice that you ask that. Nobody ever has. At the beginning, I wrote all my thank you letters when I was amongst my samples. So cool. Yes, it seems to me to be obvious, but that hasn't travelled. But I think it should be. We should be able to do that. We should be able to put your thank you letter on a plate.
Totally.
Or mug.
Totally.
It'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Jaws would drop.
Yeah,
Emotions.
Tears might even be shed.
Yeah. Not something that hasn't happened already.
And it was a very good excuse for quite a late thank you letter.
Yeah, totally. So you talked a bit about themes, so really planning ahead. I like the way you say, I get on do things. I don't. I'm like someone else is on checking things, but clearly you are checking everything. Have crazy attention to detail. Now there are so many ways of getting into people's mind, things becoming relevant for so many different people. And media is obviously a really exciting but also a busy place. I know that you've done a collaboration with Diddley Squad, Jeremy Clarkson.
That's been extraordinary.
It's
Very busy.
It feels like there's so many amazing collaborations with film. Have you ever done one with a film, for example, or?
Short answer. Just trying to think of it. What other?
Richard, he's quietly got a film. I'm thinking, I know what I want.
I'm always slightly annoyed that there aren't more pieces in the background in any of his films. I think they should be there.
Lots of.
I don't know. I mean, I quite.
in LA.
There's a part of me that's okay. I am quite puritanical. I think you do what you do, and you do it really well, and you do it with integrity, and then you become part of life, and it crops up all over the place. I suspect the next iteration of the company will have more calculated kind of planning of these things. I've just done what I could do. I don't feel I'm going to find... I wasn't really that interested in export. It seemed to me the fun would be to be very much an English proposition, that when people get to London and they find, driving around England, they find something that they've never seen before. That would be such a novel experience. And as everything is universal, I'm increasingly, obstinately not that interested in trying to do everything. I feel do what you do really, in a really heartfelt way. You don't have to do everything. And when an idea crops up, so the first James Bond film that Daniel Craig made, the various au pairs and cleaning ladies and whatever in my life and I shared enormous pleasure in Daniel Craig's first outing as James Bond. And so I did a tea towel that said, last night I had a lovely dream about Daniel Craig. And there was, oh God, you can't do that, you can't do that. We haven't got permission. I said, why don't we just do it and see? And if he minds, I'll probably get to hear about it. In fact, what I heard on the kind of grapevine was that he had given his mum one and he didn't mind at all. But we did get a note from his agent saying, when he signed up for the second one, going, no more tea towels. But so I think I like, for me, I like operating at that level rather than the big orchestrated tie-up.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that the big orchestrated tie-up's a bad thing. But it's not my bag, someone else will do it.
That Daniel Craig story is fantastic. Have you got any others? We haven't got you from it.
Not really. I wrote I Love You More Than Elvis on a big mug. And again, there was a freak out of, God, the estate will sue us till our pants fall down. And I thought, why don't we just wait and see if they do? And we can just apologise and say we won't do it again. And there was never any squeak. I don't think we probably sold that many of them because it was a long time ago. But I think just publish and be damned. And if it's wrong, then apologise and desist if someone does mind. Because by and large, I would never be saying anything rude. If you're on the spot, you want to be referenced, don't you? It's good.
Totally. There must be places that you want your products in, like a hotel or...
It's in quite a lot of them.
Yeah.
Not hotels so much. When we had West End shops, Harvey Nichols had a very good updo, probably in the 90s. We had a shop in there, and we had a shop in Marylebone, and one in the Fulham Road. And there was some very good celebrity traffic, which we were always and would always be completely discreet about. But yeah, it was very pleasing. It was going to all sorts of nice places.
Yeah. What happens when you see you have to swing into a friend of a friend's place and one of your wonderful products?
I'm just pleased. It makes me feel very happy. The funniest thing was watching that effect on my children when they were quite little, finding our pottery, the stuff we've got at home in their friends' mothers' kitchens.
Yeah, that's all.
And then when Michael was helping in the factory one half term or whatever, aged about 5 or 6 or maybe 6 or something like that, he looked up from whatever, he was probably decorating some pottery. He looked up and said, "Mum, are you like the headmaster here?" I liked watching their dawning sort of realisation that it was a phenomenon in a small way, and that some of their friends' mums really liked Emma Bridgewater pottery. That really gave me an enormous joy, seeing their kind of...
This is you.
Yeah.
I couldn't find a salt holder on your website.
No.
Do you produce those?
No.
Is that,
is that
deliberate?
There is something... Okay, Mum always used Maldon salt. There might be a bit of Saxa in the kitchen for the vegetable water or whatever, and she always had it, the salt was always in a small glass bowl with bubbles in it. That got smashed along the way. And so I tend to I pick a nice cup that I like, and I'll put salt in that on the table.
Yeah. If the world said to you, we want salt holder, would you maybe...
I'm not sure what it would look like. I just like it to be a nice bit of pottery or glass.
Small little box.
It could be. Do you think it would be a good thing? Because
I'm sad that you haven't got one.
I like a wooden pepper grinder, or indeed, I quite often grind so much pepper that I'll use a pestle and mortar. But I like less kit. I like some brutally sharp knives, steel, not stainless, old steel that you can sharpen to a really good, that'll keep an edge, and a nice chopping board and a pestle and mortar. I don't really go in, I don't want to proliferate too many one-use only things in my life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense.
And the more kit you buy, the more you clutter up the back of the cupboard.
Yeah. Are there objects that aren't made of clay that you think should be?
No, I do think that the Stoke potters were very ingenious, and they dreamt up all kinds of crazy things that they could make, most of which we really don't need. For me, simple is better. And I want people to mix my stuff with other things. Well, here we are. I love that you brought that mug in from the kitchen, but that I would always freely mix it up. So there's 2 pieces of Emma Bridgewater on the table and a whole lot of other things. And that's, for me, that's the reality. It's like your favourite jeans. It's not like a uniform that you wear all the time.
And there's people who are obsessed by your brand. Can you tell us about them? You know, that they are maybe big collectors, maybe obsessed about the heritage, and most people won't know about what a backstamp is. So the markings underneath each item. Can you tell us about that?
They are, all the hand printed, the spongeware is signed by the decorator. If that's a sample, it might have a generic thing. No, it's got someone's. I should know whose that is.
Cool. BB.
I don't. It's not mine. So some of the collectors follow specific decorators, which I completely love. Collecting pottery is a phenomenon that I hadn't realised it has long antecedents. I was doing a talk for the collectors in the factory one day, and I'd invited one of the curators from lovely Trent Museum, which has got a blisteringly fantastic ceramics collection, obviously. And he stopped the conversation and said, hang on, these collectors clubs, they're a thing. How many of you, is there anyone here? This is Emma Bridgewater's last collectors club that's sort of last man standing, as far as I know. And the last one to go was Dalton. Is anyone in the room here, were you members of the Dalton Collectors Club? And to my amazement, about half the room put their hands up. So I was their next choice as a brand to collect. And I think, so there's this business of treating it very seriously and collecting it in extraordinary amounts. It has provenance, it's not just me. It's one of the things that happens. My hunch is that traditionally women haven't had that much agency when it came to spending the domestic budget. They'd have to reference almost every decision to their husband, because it's only about two generations we've been earning alongside our husbands. And yet, associated with the idea of your sort of trousseau and your dowry or whatever, women did, I think, almost always choose the domestic china. That was an area where you didn't have to ask. And so on your wedding list or when you got married, you'd choose a pattern, and that sort of was it was part of your signature, and it's how you defined your domestic life. It was quite an important marker that you were putting down. So there is a sort of affinity. I think women have had a beady eye on ceramics as something that kind of, it's talking to us. And our husbands we're not bothered to, then it wasn't really to do with them. It was to do with us and our friends and our mum and our daughters. And I think that river still runs through it. eBay has also offered collectors an opportunity to resell some of what they buy to finance their collections. Again, that probably different pre-digital versions of that have always happened. But I'm really fascinated by the ecology of eBay, and we don't participate in that. From time to time, incomers to the company say, oh, we should be involved in this. And I think it's really interesting that the stuff sells, the collectors understand that's something that was made in very small numbers. They just seem to know that. And some of them come on the tour regularly to try and scope out which patterns we're making a lot of, because they know that those won't have such a good resale value. Whereas something that's been quite scarce, or that came and went very quickly, or that whatever, if they like it, they'll buy that, and they may well be able to get a huge price for it a few months later. If you look at the resale prices, they're quite healthy. And that's exciting. And I feel we should let that alone. But so, again, I'm not a great one for intervening. I think do the thing, you do it with integrity. And make sure, I'm lucky. It's something that I feel I love the product. And then I found Stoke and I realised there was this incredible city where they know about making things and making them really beautifully.
And looking ahead for the business, what are you excited about?
I'm excited that the current CEO and the executive team are every bit as enthusiastic as I am about making in Stoke. Because the thing that bothers me is, will it survive after me? Because my children aren't going into the business. And it's very tempting, I think, for people coming in from the outside to look at it and say, marvellous, but surely we could make a bit more money if we made it more cheaply. Somewhere labour is cheaper. And I really hope that doesn't happen. But all I can do is try and instill, it's happened, and I feel very moved by that. I would say that the current team are as excited as me, or more even, about the factory in Stoke and the Staffordshire provenance of it. So that's good. So what happens in the future? The great thing is I don't know, and I can't affect that. But I've got a good feeling that it will truck on. If it goes on, how do you maintain the integrity of a brand? Famously, it doesn't happen. But it doesn't, maybe it doesn't, it's not for me to control that. I feel quite fateful about it, but also optimistic. I used to worry about Laura Ashley, who was one of the there's a huge inspiration to me as a teenager. I loved those dresses so much, and I loved when Laura Ashley opened a shop in Oxford for a bit. I just spent so much time in there riffling through the different prints. And when she died, rather sadly early on, younger than I am now, I think, I felt an enormous sense of sadness, and the company quickly became something that I didn't really recognise. And I thought that mattered. And now I realise that I kept, and I buy when I find them, the early dresses, the ones with the big square labels that were printed and made in Wales in the 70s. And they're just wonderful things. It's wonderful that they're in the world, and those prints exist, and that back catalogue of what those things... So it's there for somebody to take up again later. It's having a life still as a brand, but someone can go back and look at how William Morris's things have stayed in the
You never
in the
lose
canon.
the history, yeah.
Sorry,
You never lose the history.
No, it's all still there once it's done, and people can go back and pick that up and do lovely things with it later. So it's not something that frets me.
It's not going...
Yes, exactly. And I feel I've put my name on an awful lot of mugs. Yeah. Plates that have gone out into the world, and that feels like...
Have you ever
fun.
called anyone a mug?
I'm sure I have.
Okay, so we're going to go through some photos of your wonderful products, and maybe we'll go through perhaps a comment or two on each one, and then I can ask you some quick questions. And then,
okay.
And then I get your hair. So here
Toast
we are.
and marmalade.
This one.
Yes.
And why are the plates a certain thickness? Is that...
It's just the making, but what has happened over the years is sometimes they get a bit fatter, sometimes they get a bit thinner. I like them thin. I'd like them thin as poppadoms.
Really?
But they aren't. Because with earthenware, you need a sort of... That's where they are. The median is both practical and aesthetically.
And because you use a mix of clays that are all from the UK, is it quite hard to maintain... Inevitably, I imagine there are changes in the clay itself, but obviously the product is consistent.
Yeah. This is something that was very highly developed in Stoke, and the size we are now, 50 years ago, we'd probably have been milling our own cake mix, you know what I mean, batter. But it's fine. We're talking about chemists and engineers who know what they're doing, the people who make the mix for us, who make the clay, don't change it.
Yeah. And your classic mug, can you tell us something about why it's got that sort of thick rim at the bottom, or the particular...
The turned foot, if you pass me that one, that just felt like the right mug. And I did know right at the beginning it was going to be hugely a mug story, but I wanted there to be a dresser story. I needed plates and teapots and stuff, but it is really about a very pleasing mug. And I also like the smaller size. I use that almost more. What I did was to collect all in one room, lots and lots of different mugs from Granny, from a house in Chelsea where I sometimes roosted, and worked out what were the characteristics. And I had mugs here and jugs and bowls. And that was really what it was about at the beginning, and a big dish. So I'd made 4 shapes at the beginning, and that was the very first. And a friend and I got that turned from a drawing into a block of wood so that we could look at the turned foot. Now, in a perfect world, it's a kind of tribute to an older Staffordshire make, where that would have been thrown, turned on a lathe, and then the handle put on separately. We cast the whole thing as one. But I wanted the flavour of Staffordshire, and that's what that feels like to me.
If we look at the butter dish, did you have a team that when you first went into the butter dish?
No, I just drew it.
Arena.
I drew the piece in my sketchbook, and then I talked to a model maker, and the first one was quite big, and then we shrunk it down. And it seems like the butter industry's followed us, and the hats are getting smaller. Have you noticed the shrinkflation? Very naughty. But the shapes are almost all drawn by me.
Yeah.
And then I'll argue with them about how stable they can make the lid and all that kind of thing.
Why this particular colour? Was there any...
Partly it's what Sam, the first guy who made for me, because I didn't intend to own a factory. I thought I would work with a Stoke potter, which I did for 5 years. And this is what Sam was making and he did the modelling of the first 4 shapes, actually, and the next dozen or so. But I was really thrilled. Half the time he was putting a coloured glaze on it or something like that. So it's a very straight down the middle of the road, Staffordshire cream earthenware. And we make it well enough that you don't have to cover it in a coloured glaze.
Right.
Back in the day, if people who were making real cheap and cheerful stuff for market stalls and whatever, they would always have to hide the clay because they'd be buying it cheap and it would be very varied in colour and what have you.
So that's not been painted?
No, that is the clay.
That is the clay?
With a pattern hand printed onto it and then dipped in glaze very skillfully to put that very fine skin of glass on it.
Yeah. Emma, thank you so much for
it's a pleasure.
If you've enjoyed this, hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Want to support the podcast, inspire as many people as possible? You can either make a donation on the Buy Me a Coffee link in our bio and website. Want to access exclusive content? Submit ideas for future episodes? Join below as a Patreon member and we will make you feel special. Thanks so much for listening.